zone you're in. I'm in the state of Florida, the current, I guess you could say, epicenter of the pandemic. So I'm going to say good morning. For a lot of you, it is probably good afternoon. Thank you to everyone who's joining us and for an incredibly important conversation today on the challenges facing refugees in this ever and very quickly, rapidly changing environment. For over half a century, Tanzania has been a country of asylum for hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing violence from neighboring countries in the region. There are currently almost 300,000 refugees living in Tanzania's confined and underfunded refugee camps, and over half of them are children. With a weak healthcare system and a lack of basic protective equipment, testing or treatment facilities, and extremely high levels of malnutrition and pre-existing health conditions, today's pandemic is posing an enormous threat to these young children and their families. Last year, funding towards refugee assistance in Tanzania fell, frankly, dramatically short, and resulting in massive shortcomings in terms of water, sanitation, shelter, and education for refugees in the country. And hopefully this conversation can have some impact on changing that. The dire conditions in these refugee camps, the funding gap Tanzania is experiencing currently, the lack of visibility, which is something Concordia is committed to changing, and support on behalf of the international community are serious challenges and will remain so unless we can find a new and innovative way to connect life-saving supplies and support to refugees in desperate need. The role of public-private partnerships and grassroots initiatives in tackling these changes is essential to success. With these challenges in mind, it is a great pleasure to introduce some visionary leaders and some members of the Concordia community who are thinking about the issues facing refugees and are looking for innovative and sustainable solutions. First, I want to thank my friend Armand Arton and the Arton Capital team for hosting this webinar. Armand serves as the CEO of Arton Capital as well as a senior advisor to Concordia. He has been a tremendous partner of Concordia over the past few years and a committed partner in furthering our social impact. I know in a little bit we will be hearing from Wyclef Jean. I'll introduce him briefly here, but I think he does not need any formal introduction. But a Grammy Award-winning artist, music producer, actor, philanthropist, and spent most of his career elevating those who are suffering the hardships of forced migration, refugee crises, and natural disasters, as well as oppressive poverty through his music, public speaking, and his philanthropic work. I've got to say, I think he sets a different and new, higher benchmark for others to follow. I'm also so glad to see Bester Mulauzi, who's the Director of Program Development and Quality at Save the Children International, an organization that is also a collaborator with Concordia. And it's great to have you back, Bester. Tali Yordanova is also on. She serves as the CEO of Global Citizen Forum and is going to be the moderator of the discussion today. No pressure, Tali. Global Citizen Forum has also been a tremendous partner of Concordia, and Tali has been a driving force for positive dialogue and catalyzing action around forced migration, refugee crisis, and climate change. In closing, responding to this urgent crisis, Global Citizen Forum, in collaboration with Wyclef and Save the Children, recently launched a collaborative campaign aiming to raise funds for this issue. Actually, a total of $1 million to meet the vital needs of refugee children and families in Tanzania, including proper health, sanitation, nutrition, education, and protection of fundamental human rights. So now is a critical time for cross-sector collaboration, public-private partnerships, and frankly, a more unified world. This virtual discussion will explore how we can build sustainable cross-sector coalitions and leverage the expertise of each sector so that we can find sustainable solutions to address the endemic problems facing refugees in Tanzania. Before I pass it off, and then I'll be quiet, a few Zoom housekeeping items. Important, so please pay attention. This shift to digital is not easy for everybody. All attendees are automatically muted when they enter the platform. And so to ask a question during the Q&A, raise your hand and Concordia will unmute you. Use the Q&A feature to ask questions or upvote those submitted by your colleagues. We'll be answering these at the end of the session. Concordia will be monitoring the chat feature, but we do encourage you to use the Q&A platform to ask questions. Feel free to put all of your opinions and thoughts into this safe environment and community through the chat feature. But if you have a question, please use the Q&A platform to ask questions. We have a poll, so please complete the poll and help Concordia design content that is of interest to you, our broader member community. This webinar is being recorded and will be accessible via the Concordia website for future viewing at www.concordia.net. The Q&A portion is not going to be recorded, however, because that is a special benefit to our members who will be joining live. So with that, I will pass it to you, Tali.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for the great introduction, and thank you very much to Concordia for hosting this session. Actually, you did half of my work. I was supposed to introduce the topic and the speakers.
Oh,
no, I'm joking. It's my great pleasure. As Matthew mentioned, my name is Tali. I'm the CEO of the Global Citizen Forum, and I've been working with the organization since its very inception. Just a few words on the GCF as an organization. The GCF is a Canadian non-profit, non-partisan organization committed to advancing the agenda for global citizenship across 5 pillars: governance, mobility and migration, culture and identity, technology, and sustainability. The main focus of our work is to bridge dialogue with action, where we host a series of high-level events and discussions throughout the year. And on the action front, we partner with various grassroots organizations that are instrumental in addressing global challenges on a micro scale on the ground. The refugee crisis is a crisis that the GCF holds very dear to its heart and is completely embedded in everything that we do. We believe that the world exists in a context of complete interconnectedness already, and true global mindset cannot be achieved unless mobility and migration are treated as equally distributed public goods, which is very far from the case right now. As I'm sure all of the attendees and the audience today is aware, the refugee crisis is probably the biggest failure of migration, and is so complex in its nature that solving it has also not been much of a success. But this is where the role of civil society and international community really comes in, with a very strong impact that this group of organizations can really bring to the vulnerable communities and the people that are suffering from these conditions. As Matthew mentioned, the GCF has recently embarked on a fundraising initiative with an ambitious, but we believe achievable goal to raise $1 million to support 2 refugee camps in Tanzania, with helping them to obviously close the massive funding gap that they're experiencing at the moment, and to also prepare the communities for the catastrophic effects that the global pandemic can have on the local operations. Without further ado, I have an absolutely amazing panel here today. We are probably going to have Wyclef join any minute now, but I would like to start with Bester.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you upgrade Preacher from the attendees? This is Wyclef. He just joined. Thank you.
I believe we have Wyclef on.
Hello.
We don't see you.
Okay, could y'all see me now?
No.
No.
Okay, I'll figure out how y'all could see me. Y'all could keep going, but it's really me. Someone please call 911. It's really me. I will find it. All right, I'll find it. Okay, here we go. Y'all should see me now.
Yes. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with y'all. Sorry I'm late. If I told y'all what happened to me, Y'all would say Wyclef is using the excuse that the dog ate my homework, so I won't get into it. But I'm so happy to be here for the cause.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, you didn't miss much. We were just giving a round of introductions and an overview of the topic. We're going to start the discussion with Bester Mulauzi, who's from Tanzania, and he's working on the ground with refugee camps there. Bester is Director of Program Development and Quality for Tanzania for Save the Children, and he has vast experience in humanitarian aid, working in Malawi, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and currently in Tanzania. So Bester, as Matthew mentioned at the beginning of the introduction, there is almost 300,000 displaced people living in confined and severely underfunded refugee camps in Tanzania at the moment. You're there, you're on the ground, you see it every day. Can you please tell us with more details, what is the current situation in the country, and particularly what is the reality in the refugee camps and the children that are living there today? What does it look like?
Thanks, Tali, and thank you for having me on this webinar. And it's a pleasure to join Mr. Wyclef Jean, Mr. Armand Arton, two distinguished gentlemen, to talk about a topic I know is very dear to their hearts. As Matt said in the introduction, we call the Tanzania refugee situation a forgotten crisis, because very few around the world know that Tanzania currently hosts close to 300,000 registered refugees and asylum seekers, most of whom are Burundian and a sizable population from Congo. And the majority seek refuge in 3 refugee camps in northwestern region of Tanzania called Kigoma. And of these 300,000, around 50%, over 50% of the refugees are children. As for the conditions in the camps, almost 50% of the refugees and asylum seekers across all the camps continue to live in inadequate emergency shelters and tents for an extended period of time. And this leads to unacceptable living conditions and increased risk of sexual and gender-based violence. Most recently, all the refugees in Tanzania have been under stringent restrictions in their mobility to move outside the camps. And this predates the COVID outbreak. And they're also not allowed to take part in income generating activities, which makes it very difficult for vulnerable refugees to meet their basic needs. This wasn't the case before. So these two policies have severely hindered the ability of refugees to create sustainable livelihood opportunities and have increased the difficulty of finding diversified food and services. And this further compounding poverty at household level has led to negative coping mechanisms that the refugees have to take. And this is leading to early marriage, child labor, and increased violence and sexual violence. And this is also mainly due to the psychological stress that the refugees are facing. The levels of neglect, both with children with their families and foster care arrangements, is a concern. We also see that women and children experience the brunt of these protection, and the risks in their homes, schools, and communities are very bad.
And has there been any changes during the the current situation with the global pandemic and the complications this created? How have the refugee camps been affected by that?
Fortunately, we've not had an outbreak in the camps yet, which is very fortunate, because apart from the threat of COVID, in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, you also have an active Ebola outbreak still going on at the moment, and as well as measles outbreak, which has actually reached the camps. And so that's a big risk. And the fact that 60% of the households do actually share toilets and share hygiene and wash facilities is actually brings that risk. So you can't social distance, you can't shield elderly from children and others, because you're just in a confined setting.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for giving this overview, and of course, thank you for the amazing work that you're doing on the ground, because I'm sure it's very challenging. I would like to turn to our dear friend Wyclef now. Wyclef, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for supporting this initiative and the fundraiser that we're putting together. You've been a friend to the GCF and a supporter since its very beginning, and not only that, great voice for the refugee communities around the world, and you have supported and advocated for their rights for many, many years. I would like to ask you, why did you choose to join this initiative, and why are you supporting it, and why do you find it so dear to your heart?
Thank you, everybody. And it's an honor once again to be with y'all on the call. And I just want to start by giving everybody a virtual hug, you know what I'm saying? Giving everybody virtual love out there. For me, the cause of a refugee has been a cause for me from the start. I was born in Haiti under extreme poverty. And at the time we had what was called the baby doc era. And this is after his father, Papa Doc, was reigning. So the next dictator in line was baby doc. So within that, you had what was called a migration of Haitians that were literally flooding the Cuban shore waters and heading to Miami, you know? And at this time, you had a lot of families that were dying at sea. And so I had family that literally tried to get to Miami and never made it. And this reality of when people have to flee because of circumstances, right? They're not fleeing because they trying to go on a vacation. It's literally like they're fleeing for their lives, you know what I mean? So usually what I find out is people don't look at them as people. Because if you looked at them as people, then people within senates and parliaments would fight for policies that really concern these issues. And we have found that these people are turned away usually back to where they come from, or they suffer beyond extreme humane difficulties that not even animals would go through. And I'm speaking firsthand. So one of the things that I've done in my early days, my group, which is called Fugees, is short for refugees. So this is not something that you know, I just woke up today and said, let me do. You know, I'm 50 years old now. So this is a cause. I know I look younger, baby, but I'm 50. This is a cause that I've been fighting for since I've been 17 years old. And so I think it's important as we move towards the future. One thing people used to say is, man, you live in Brooklyn. I remember these words. Why are you so worried about Africa, for example? You know, you live in New Jersey. You know, why are you worried about Haiti? And what I used to tell them is, have you ever looked at the world from a satellite point of view? And if you do, then you'll understand that we all are people and everything is cause and effect. So within cause and effect, if we don't act and we don't do something and we don't find a way to say, you know what, we're gonna affect policy, we're gonna make the politicians see it in a different way, right? So it's like, it's bigger than raising $1 million, right? Because when we raise the $1 million, what we wanna do is we wanna alert the powers that be, like, y'all really have to do more. And so for me, this is something that's dear to my heart. One probably story I could probably share with y'all, heavy refugee story for me, is I don't think people understand the reality of the fleeing, you know, part. Because you have to understand, like, imagine how fortunate we are having families and saying, okay, you know, we decide to get on a boat and go somewhere. You know, we decide that. We decide to get on a plane and go somewhere. We are deciding this. But the idea of within seconds, you harboring your children, your wife, your husband, and then you leave to a place of complete darkness because you don't have, I just want y'all to take a second. Imagine you in this position, like the word scary, you can't even imagine that. So this is like, we have to fight for this cause because it's like when we're fighting for them, we're fighting for ourselves. And so to me, once again, I'm honored and I look forward to giving 100% of my soul to the cause of refugees till I pass away. That's just a natural thing for me, coming where I come from. It's an obligation. And I think that we people that have means, it is an obligation that we do better. So thank you for having me, and y'all can count on me 100%.
Thank you so much, Wyclef. And honestly, I wish there were more people like you out there, because what you're saying is completely true. And it's true, the hardship and the trauma and the stress that refugee families go through is absolutely unimaginable. And it's very difficult for someone to put themselves in their shoes, fleeing, but not only fleeing, also settling in the refugee camps and spending. Bester, how many years on average does a refugee child spend in the camps in Tanzania?
We have, the majority of refugees have been there around 3 to 5 years, but then you have Congolese refugees who have been in those camps for 15 years. Children who were born in the camps are now 14 years old, still staying in those refugee camps.
Yeah. So this is a reality which is very difficult to grasp and very difficult to, you know, come to terms with, let's say. But we have a role to play, and it's important that we work together and we collaborate. And I'm sure that the civil society has a lot to offer to. I don't think we can solve the crisis, but we can try to alleviate it in one way or another. I would like to turn to Armand now. Armand is a really great example, I would say, definitely personally for me as a professional, but I think in the context of being a global leader and a business entrepreneur and an activist at the same time, I think Armand really encompasses this bridge between actually this transition from for-profit to profit with purpose. And I think Armand really understands very well the role that private sector plays in this entire context. So Armand, could you share with us what is your view from your experience? You have a very vast experience already in terms of the shortages on behalf of governments, the shortages on behalf of the private sector, and the shortages on behalf of international organizations as well. And how do you think the role of the private sector can be strengthened?
Thank you. Thank you, Tali. Thank you, Matthew from Concordia, Wyclef, and Bester for being part of this initiative and for allowing me to help as much as we can as well. As dear brother Wyclef said, it all starts personal. It starts with your own life and with your own experience. And some of the best initiatives, some of the most successful businessmen as well as activists have started from a very single story from their personal life that have pushed them and they have pushed boundaries around the in a block of Europe, Bulgaria at the time. We didn't go to refugee camps, but the whole Eastern Bloc was a refugee camp. With very limited access to the rest of the world, with very much controlled information. So my youth was really very different from what my kids are spending today. And as every parent, as every human being, what you want is a better future for your own children. So living through, through the end of the communist time and seeing the fall of the Berlin Wall, and living in 3-4 countries before I turned into the age of 20 and start my career in Canada. From a first hand, I really realized that even though none of us have ever chose the place of birth, that's pretty much the only thing that you can control. Everything else, it's within the power of your belief, of your determination, and can be changed. And yet that place of birth determines so much. Even if you become a successful like Wyclef on the other side of the world, and you make history, and you still carry that little passport that limits so much about where you can go and what you can do. And Brother Wyclef knows that firsthand, asking for visas in many countries, even being a celebrity as he is until recently. So the success it's a very funny word. It's determined in everybody's own understanding of what it is success. But for me personally, being somebody that wants to help people move freely around the world has become my personal mission. On a corporate level, our company works with many governments on migration policies, attracting of investments. But on a personal level, I think that we all have a responsibility not to forget where we are from. And we tend to do that very often. We tend to forget where our parents come from. And now we maybe complain about wearing mask or not wearing mask when our grandparents, starved through the Second World War, through the famines of some of the worst disasters they have seen. And yet they have succeeded, and they have provided to our parents, and our parents have provided to us. So I think we need to think a little bit different, and very well, as Wyclef said, is when you look at Earth from the cosmos, no borders, no lines. We're seen as one, and yet we don't act as one. It takes something like the pandemic for us to really reshape our way of thinking, of communicating, and of taking care. So why Tanzania and why this project? Even though the cases in Africa are not as big as cases in United States or other countries in Asia or Middle East, we believe that putting efforts in advance and preparing, especially the most vulnerable people in the refugee camps, and as Bester said, in average, they spend 17 years. We spend 3 months in the comfort of our rooms and choosing between Netflix and popcorn and other media tools, where those children will spend not 3 months, 17 years in the confinement of a single tent without basic necessities, without having the medical equipment necessary, without having the sewage and the basic things that we don't think about it. And those things can make a change in their life in terms of life or death, because pandemics like the Ebola, like the COVID, will only be roaming in, I think, more accelerated rate around the world because of the nature we are. We will travel more, we will expand, and the way that our parents used to travel 100 years ago or 50 years ago is not the way we travel now. And look at the world when we stop. Everything stops, and the economy collapses, and politics will be changed. So I think we need to be more sensible. We need to be more human. And I think we all have as actors of our society, a role to play. Being on a corporate side, being on a personal side, we can help with not financially only contribution, but providing the access and the platform of where you stand and what you can do for those kids. And for these people, because they are kids now, tomorrow they will be teenagers, and tomorrow they will be adults, and they're still gonna be in these refugee camps. So let's not forget that, and let's try to help with what we can, bring the attention and the focus through the digital world we all live in today. And as much as I love to save their lives. And thank you for Save the Children of helping to reach out to as many people as we do through Concordia and really make a difference.
Thank you, Armand, for your contribution and for the amazing work that we're able to do together. Bester, I would like to come back to you. We're trying to raise $1 million for 2 refugee camps in Tanzania to support the children in those camps. As you can see from the organizers of the fundraisers, we're going to give 100% of ourselves, of our effort and our focus to achieve that goal. Tell us how can $1 million make a difference in Tanzania?
Thanks. That's a lovely question. You know, when we ask children, because we regularly consult and engage children in the camps, and when you ask the children the same question, what do you need? What are your biggest needs? You'd be surprised. They're in very dire situations. They most likely haven't had a full meal, but they say education. They would say that the education is their most pressing need. I think they look at education as their way out to break out of the situation they're in permanently. And so that's education is what they really want. And for your information, Tali, there are about 90,000 children of school-going age in the camps. Of those, 10,000 are completely out of school. They're not in school. And for those that are actually are in school, many are still studying under trees due to shortage of classrooms and overcrowding. The schools also lack, as I said, toilets. And this really has negative consequences on girls' education, as you know, and also education for children with disabilities. They end up dropping out because there's just not enough facilities such as that. The schools also lack teachers. Learning materials are not there. So there's not enough learning materials. They don't have enough qualified teachers. And again, these are the things that force children to drop out. On a more serious also need is protection, child protection. And there are about 5,000 children who are unaccompanied and separated from their parents and guardians. So 5,000 children in the camps who do not have any parents or guardians. And these children are in a very vulnerable state, and they're subjected to a lot of abuse, neglect, and exploitation because of that. And that's something that we also work towards, trying to unify children, trying to case manage, find out where their parents are, and try to connect them using various partners. Even for the children that do have guardians, we've noticed recently in the schools and child-friendly spaces that we support, that a lot of children are going to school looking very miserable. They're unkempt, showing a lot of signs of neglect. And so you can also see that a lot of children are being subjected to violence, gender-based violence. And that's also manifested by the high rates of teenage pregnancies that we now have in the camps. So we really need to also look at the protection angle, trying to protect children who are very vulnerable in the camps. A lot of this stems from the fact that when you are in the camps, the situation forces you to have psychosocial problems and mental health problems a lot. And we're experiencing that a lot among our beneficiaries, both old and young. And so we also support mental and psychosocial support for children especially. We have child psychologists, and that's something that we need to strengthen because we just don't have enough people. We're not able to reach as many children as we possibly could, should we have had funding. And even we're failing to meet over like 30%, 40% of the children. And with the reduction in funding, that's really going to drop. Our reach is going to really drop because we don't have the funding available to reach all the children that are vulnerable. So as vulnerabilities are increasing, the funding is decreasing, which is a precarious situation.
What is the reason for that?
The funding, as I said earlier, it's a forgotten crisis. I think the funders from Europe, the West, who used to support refugee responses, shifted their response and started supporting their own refugee crisis that came up in Europe, for example. And so they're focusing on that. And now with the COVID outbreak, a lot of countries are reducing their donor funding and looking internally and trying to tackle their needs on the ground. And I think that's why even the humanitarian partnerships and the organizations which have been traditionally supporting and working in refugee response, we actually need to introspect and look at how do we bring in other partners. And that's why we're really excited about this partnership with Global Citizen Forum, Wyclef Jean and others to try to bring in new people to support this need because the gaps are so big.
Yes.
If I may just add that we have seen with other international organizations that in the beginning of this crisis, and I think we're only in the beginning of the financial crisis, definitely philanthropy will be affected as well. People will start reducing by the end of this year, estimated 30 to 40% their philanthropic contributions on a personal level. Companies will do the same. So except few tech companies and maybe pharmaceutical who might and should increase their CSR responsibility and budgets, I think the rest of the world will definitely retract and will have less funds to donate. Same thing with international organizations who don't know where to put the priority between all the countries, small islands and developing nations asking for funds and support. So I think 2021 will be very different economically as a year, and will be very challenging to find the financial support that we need. That's why I think we need to prepare from now and have the base necessary to support this project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I hope more and more organizations follow, and I hope Tanzania sees more and more support, because it seems that the level of it's severely overlooked, not only in terms of funding, but also in terms of visibility and recognition from the international community. So hopefully we can help on that front as well with the work that we're doing, and with Wyclef's endorsement and support. Wyclef, I would like to turn back to you again. I know you love children, and I know you're a strong supporter of the cause, as we already mentioned. In normal circumstances, I would really love for us to visit those camps and for these children to be able to see you and talk to you, because I'm sure you're a superhero to them. But these are not normal circumstances, and hopefully one day we can do that, but for now we can't. So I wanted to ask you, if you had a chance to talk to one of these kids in the camp, what would you tell them?
First thing I want to say is I really want to thank the brother, because one of my concerns, right, is always security in these camps, right? Because raising funds is one thing, but securing the children is something different. This is like so devastating, because where I come from in Haiti, one of the things that I've done in my early days when I had my foundation, Yele, was in every favela, I hired a task force. So literally, I took the bad boys and I made them the security. And was like, if anything happened to any of these kids, y'all are now responsible. Because what happens is, raising money is one thing. Securing life is another. And so that definitely touched me, because we have to do everything that we can to protect these kids. Because when we read the reports, the way a lot of different countries, these kids are being abused, automatically depression, I heard you talking about psychiatrists, all of this made me feel good. So I wanted off by saying that. So now, to my kid, and if I was to say something, and you could translate it later. So one day, there was a man, right? But he was a little tiny boy. And he lived in a small village. And in this village, he didn't have anything to eat. At times for weeks, he had no access to water. When he wanted water, him and his grandma got on a donkey, and they would go for miles and miles and miles till they get the water. And then they would come back to the village. And this went on for days and days. So one day, this little boy gathered every little kid in the village, and he said, guess what? From now on, we will no longer be hungry. We will no longer be thirsty. And the kids are like, how? I mean, we have nothing, so we are going to be hungry. He says, no. You have the will of God. And the God that has created you will never let you finish like that. So you have to believe and have faith. And have faith, because tomorrow is gonna be a brighter day. 9 times out of 10, tell the kids when they are telling this story, someone's gonna say, man, you're making this up, it don't exist. Then you tell them in the village that it does exist, because there was a young man from this small village of Haiti, and his name is Wyclef Jean today. So that's what I want you to translate and let all the kids know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I wish we have a chance to really visit the beautiful country of Tanzania and the camps, and have a chance to really speak to the children and give them that piece of inspiration and hope for the future. I think we'd like to open the floor for some questions from the audience. I believe the Concordia team is collecting some questions from the attendees on the panel. Let me just Matthew, are you still on the call? Okay.
I think he's left.
All right. Sorry, just a second. Okay, while I find the questions, because I'm sorry, I can't really see them, I'll ask Armand to share his experience from visiting the camps and meeting the children, because Armand, I know you've worked in the past with children projects in Jordan, and seeing the impact and the joy that this brings. So if you want, you could share the story with us.
With pleasure. And it's true that the last 5 years, since 2015, the world has much more focus on the European crisis of refugees and all the Middle East and Africa, North African people trying to cross the Mediterranean. So since the last 5 years, our organizations, Art and Capital, as well as Global Citizen Forum, have started a few initiatives to support small or big projects related mainly to refugee camps in the Middle East. And this is why I think that the whole world did this, and they kind of forgot about the refugee camps in the rest of the world, you know, from Southeast Asia to Africa, where actually many more people are living and struggling for much longer than the camps in Jordan or Lebanon. But what I saw from firsthand in Jordan, in Azraq camp, was kids were just flown the war in Syria, and some of them, you know, had a terrible stories that, you know, would only live in seen in movies. In parents lost the brothers and sisters, and those kids would have a smile and a laugh and a happiness and a joy that, as I said, you know, our spoiled brat kids, you know, will need an iPad or a new toy, and they just were happy to see people, to friendly, to play with them. And we built Caravans of Joy, which is containers that were modified for the kids, filled with toys. And we also find those parents or adults in the camps that had educational background to actually supervise the kids and provide from the early age, 6 years to 14 years old, to and my first fear was that, oh my God, but these kids, as soon as we opened the doors, you know, they were lining up an hours to wait, and there was limited time. And I was afraid that they're all gonna leave with the toys, and there was, you know, a limited number of things we could bring per container. To my surprise, 3 months later, most of these toys were still there and shared. And the fact that those kids had nothing and they kept those toys and shared them with hundreds of other kids, and they didn't try to steal them or take them away or take away these moments of joy for their other friends in the camp, you know, was telling so much about what kind of mental situation they have been in, what kind of spirit and will they have. So I haven't had the privilege and the honor to visit the camps in Tanzania, and I look forward one day to do it. But I'm very much sure I'm going to see the same smiles and the same look in the eyes, because they all share this this drive of sharing, this compassion that not many kids have around the world. And I believe that some of them one day will be our leaders. Some of them will hold positions in organizations, will be presidents of countries. And I just hope that one day, you know, the world will be driven by people like that.
Absolutely. I'm absolutely certain, and I truly believe in that. So, okay, we got one question from the audience from John. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the surname properly, Benitez. His question is, what's been the biggest challenge you encounter in making the case for helping refugees? I'd say we can ask Bester first, and then of course Armand.
Thanks once again. That's a great question. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the competition for, there are limited resources out there for humanitarian support, especially refugees. And it's sort of like you're competing with, as I said, the European refugee crisis. You're also competing against more popular emergencies in Somalia, Yemen, which already attract a lot of media attention. And now with the COVID outbreak, it's even going to be worse because that's what's getting all the attention. And so we foresee that there are going to be much more challenges than we already have.
Absolutely. Armand, what about your experience? Because we've worked a lot on making the case for the refugee cause. So what would you say are the biggest challenges?
The problem is perception. And I think it's, as we said before, I think migration needs rebranding. People forget the benefits of these people on the move. They see them as costs and not as an investment. They think they steal jobs or they bring insecurity, when actually they bring multiculturalism, history, and contribute to society much more than what, you know, people see now. So the challenge is extreme right views from different political parties all around the world who you know, it's very easy to scare population instead of defending, you know, migration and bringing supports to refugees. So that's the challenge we have, rebranding the benefits of refugees and completely changing the conversation from negative to positive. I'm not saying that there is no criminality. I'm not saying that there is not, of course, financial challenge of hosting countries when they're in such a situation. But in the long term, the benefits absolutely outpass the costs.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, on behalf of Wyclef, he had to leave because there was another engagement, and he asked to say goodbye to everyone on his behalf, and he thanks us one more time for having him. Armand, we have another question to you. You just spoke of the drive and compassion of youth that you've witnessed, which is also demonstrating maturity beyond years. What would you like to see from elected leaders in the global community at this time? What would be the #1 priority from political leaders in Tanzania, Africa, and the global community if they could change one policy or movement process? This question is from Hannah Dalmat, Senior Director, Partnership Development at Concordia.
Thank you for the question. I believe that leaders today, it doesn't matter if they're political or business leaders, they need to respond to the crisis with much more humanity and compassion, and less of egos and less of me. It's more of we. I think, again, I deplore when I see politicians or corporate leaders using the crisis to cut costs, or again, to control and vehicle the message in a way for them to gain political or financial gains. Just, you know, I think we have to think less about us and what we can make out of it, or how we can survive it, and think about the others.
Bester, actually, I'd like to extend the same question to you, but in the context of the Tanzanian government in particular. What policies do you think need to be put in place so that the situation can be alleviated? I wouldn't say resolved. I wouldn't use that.
Yeah, no, and we are, as organizations, advocating for this improvement in policies, both at country level and also regional. The biggest issue is to allow, and this, we've seen this in other neighboring countries where refugees are actually allowed to assimilate within the host communities, or get jobs, or have, or come up with a livelihood, at least while they remain as refugees. They come up with a livelihood where they can fend for themselves and can actually be productive citizens, productive individuals for the country. And that now releases the burden and also improves what Armand talked about, where people do not see them as a burden to the country, but actually you see what they contribute, because a lot of these refugees come up with unique things, they also bring unique skills from where they're coming from, and culture, rich culture, and the like. So we actually are advocating for government to change policies around assimilation of refugees, allowing them to gain some employment within the country, or to engage in income generating activities around the camps to improve their livelihoods.
Thank you for your answer. With that, I would like to wrap up the discussion. For anyone that is interested in the fundraising initiative and campaign that the GCF is running in collaboration with Save the Children UK, please follow the link which will be shared after the webinar, and also you can visit the website of the GCF to see ways you can get involved. This is as everyone on the panel mentioned, is a cause that can be supported in many ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be funding, but also raising awareness and advocating and amplifying the message of the Tanzanian, like we call them, the forgotten children in Tanzania, is already of great benefit and great importance for their future and for their livelihood. I would like to thank once again Concordia for hosting this session and for supporting our mission to drive the dialogue and action towards the refugee children in Tanzania. And I would like to thank the great panel and the speakers, Armand Arton and Bester Mulauzi, for sharing their views and their experience in the field and on the ground. Thank you once again. It was a pleasure having you. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we'll make change happen together.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tali, and thanks everyone as well. Thanks, Armand.